Hello everybody and welcome to Steamforged Games. I'm your host Jamie and we're joined by...
Alex.
Alex, you're
Again.
back again.
I live here now.
Can you believe it?
This is my house.
Can you believe it?
You should be able to believe it.
You
I'm
should
here
be
all
able
the
to
time.
And we have got today for you the Gaping Dragon expansion for Dark Souls the board game and the Old Iron King expansion.
We do.
Now, Gaping Dragon is available to pre-order on the website. Old Iron King, however, is a Kickstarter exclusive, so you won't be able to get a hold of him.
Right, so what, should we start with Gaping Dragon?
Yeah, let's kick off with him.
So I guess we'll open with the... You'll see that we have a model on the table already. To try and save the time of fumbling around with the models, because Giblin's hopeless at putting them together, we put some together ahead of time so we can just bring them up and show them. So we can show you what they look like in the packaging, you can see what they're like together, and you don't have to watch us fumbling and filling for time while they get put together.
Yeah. And if you have any questions about any of these expansions, feel free to drop them in chat on YouTube or Twitch, and I'll be able to pick them up.
Yep. So we'll do as we usually do. I'll just go through the contents of the box as we take it out. So the regular, where can we see that well? There we go. So the regular rulebook, the ones that, if you've watched any of these streams before, you'll be familiar with what these look like. They're all 16 pages long. They start with all very similar text across all of them, like the setup of what you do and how to use them and stuff is all the same. And then
level 4 encounters as well.
Level 4 encounters is in there.
Every single Mega Boss comes with level 4 encounter cards.
4 of them, 2 that are just for use with the core game, and then 2 that will use some expansions. And then around page 12, you get to the kind of stuff that's individual to the particular Mega Boss you're looking at. So that's what one of those pages looks like.
Screen grab.
Yeah. So there you go. That's what that looks like. And then the campaign stuff's at the back. So you know what they look like. We won't spend too much time looking at that. We'll go on to Ronan, which is easier for you to do now. Should we do the model first before we go onto the board? So you don't have to scurry around too much. So the model, he's been sat here all along.
How big he is.
He's very small. He's dainty. I think like petite is what we'll call him.
He's huge. He is absolutely massive.
He's hungry. For delicious, delicious people. So yeah, he's enormous. Obviously, this is a 150mm base, which is...
Is he one of our biggest models?
He's got to be up there. Yeah. I mean, the amount of him that comes off the back of the base as well. Yeah. Like, he just kind of doesn't stop going. There's bits of him everywhere. Super cool model. Nice dynamic pose, about as dynamic as you can get for the gigantic weird lizard dragon man that goes around, sometimes on 6 legs and sometimes on 4, with his weird, big, devouring maw facing everyone. So that's that. You've seen a lot of photos and stuff of him, but that's what the model looks like. So we'll move that over there, and then we'll drag out the tile. And I will try and remember... Oh, wow. We've started already. I shall attempt to remember to flip the tile over, because I forgot to do that for the 4 Kings when I did that last time, to show you what the other side looks like, and it's a really cool representation of New Londo on the other side of that one, so I'm a bit annoyed I forgot to show it, but there you go. Something for those to look forward to that have got it. We'll start with the boss side. So this is the boss side. Anyone that's like faced him should be familiar with this scene. So he will spawn over here, move these guys out of the way, bring the big boy back over. So that's where he'll come in. You'll come in over here. You've got the sort of the crumbling pillars and stuff that you'll be familiar with if you've played the video games in the sewers that you face him, and then kind of the big bit of water that he kind of crawls out in the initial cutscene when you see him starts over here. So
kind of creepy.
I really like the colours on this one. Like, I think the tones, it's very... Everything's kind of got a hint of green to it.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is what I think of when I think of
this fight.
Like this fight, and seeing it kind of high res. Like, a lot of the weird parts of this process when we're going through talking to the texture artists to get these boards done is kind of looking at it, and initially you're like, but I'm not sure that looks like darks. Like, that doesn't remind me of that area. And then you're like, wait, that's because it's like high definition, high res textures versus...
Have you played the remastered?
Not yet. I have it, but I haven't played it yet.
Okay.
So yeah, that's that side. I imagine that's what people would have expected to see for that side. And then we flip over to the encounter side, and we have a bit of an adaptation on an area from the depths. So in the depths, there's kind of a lot of cool stuff that's going on. Like you've got bits of grating, you've got kind of the toxic like streams of water and stuff, walls breaking things up, a few pillars holding stuff up. Rather than going for one specific room necessarily, we've kind of taken bits from the kind of area as a whole and tried to fill a big square with as many of those features. So this is more of an adaptation of the area. There is a room that this is very close to, but it's very rare that anything is just a square in Dark Souls.
Yeah,
like there's corridors coming off it and stuff. But this one's one of my favourites. I really like this tile. I believe it was, I'll check the rulebook, but I believe it was Ed Burrell that did this one. There on the back it was. So Ed Burrell did this one. Did a super good job of it. We're really happy with it. You got the slimy stuff everywhere. It's just a really cool tile. The breaks in the wall so that, people understand that you can, there is a way to get through to all these areas. You're not blocked off anywhere. Yeah. So that's a really cool one. Pack that away. Should we pack that? Yeah, we will pack that away because we've got another boss to go through yet.
Yeah, we've got Old Iron King.
So, that's that. What else is in the box?
What's in the box? What's in the box?
So your usual dial, you will see that there are also tokens on this because he does do a condition, the corrosion condition. It was something that we wanted to try and represent as faithfully as we could.
Yeah.
The rules for that, if you get hit by an attack that causes corrosion, you have -1 to a block roll.
Which is pretty scary. His attacks hit pretty hard, or at least the body slam was a scary concept when I was writing up the update for him.
And then that will go away when you take damage. So similar to bleed in that respect. It will stay on until you take damage from it, so it's guaranteed to do something. So that one's a nice, easy one.
And what 46 health points?
So it's 46 health, armor 3, resistance 2, heats up on 26, 6 starting cards in his behavior deck. I'm trying to remember the numbers on those. I believe it is 2 of these. So he has some signature cards.
He has to have these cards in his deck because these have the body slam symbol. So they are guaranteed to be in there. So you know that these big, strong 7 damage attacks are coming in. But
there is a follow-up to those.
Yeah.
So I believe the deck construction is 3 regular cards, of which there are, I believe, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Good job, memory. So I believe it's 3 of those, both of these, and 1 heat-up card goes in from the start.
Yep.
The heat-up cards are all a variant of corrosive ooze, so that's where your corrosion comes in. So you're guaranteed to have some corrosion in there from the start.
Yep.
Then we have another card here called Crawling Charge. I don't know how well on the camera you can just make out an outline to this symbol here.
Yep.
So this symbol is the charge symbol, the crawl symbol I believe it's called. After you've made your deck, so we'll pretend that this is our deck here. So this is our behaviour deck. This card sits next to your behaviour deck. Whenever a stomach slam is resolved and you see the crawl icon come up, he immediately does this as well.
Yeah.
So that's so he slams his maw down, does his charge across the board, because within the game he will always, nearly always do stomach slam charge. That's what his AI is programmed to do. So we tried to represent that in this by having this as a card that is always active. Whenever he does this, he does this.
Immediately.
And as there is guaranteed to be 2 of these in there at all times, he does that a reasonable amount. And then, as I say, you put heat-up cards in there from the start to show off what's going on with his corrosion stuff. And then when he heats up, I believe it's just add 1 more card in. So I guess a peek behind the curtain. When it comes to development of these bosses, there are numbers that we really like to use, and we're aware that we do have to mix them up.
Yeah, otherwise
if we could, every boss we ever made would be 5 cards to start, add 2 to get you to 7 for heat up, because it means outside of single player games, you're not in a situation where each person can just memorize the card that they get hit by.
So you want to be on the odd numbers so it passes around.
Yes. So we really like those numbers. Obviously, this one starts at 6, then goes to 7. So once he's heated up, it breaks that pattern a bit. He was super cool one.
He heats up a little bit earlier than most bosses. It's not exactly half.
Yeah, so it's after 20. No, not 20 health. Is it 20?
After 20 health. After 20 damage is taken, he heats up.
And then just the little bit of text on the card is just to remind you of the the stomach, the kind of deck construction rules.
Yeah.
Threat 10, not that he's the only model on the board, so it doesn't really matter. That's him. There is some treasure in there, but as always, I'm not showing you that.
Yeah, keep that as a surprise.
Save that one for later. And just so you can see what he looks like in the box, I don't know how good an angle I can get on this.
Bring it into the middle here, and then we can get the big juicy camera on it.
Where are we? We there?
Yeah.
So that's as the model comes. So arms are separate, wings are separate, tail's separate, everything else is on the model. So just click those in and you're good to go.
Yeah, it's all push fit, no glue required.
Look like that one. So that is him. Do we have any questions on him, or shall we move on to the next one?
No, just straight on to Mr. Old Iron King.
Oh boy. He was such a fun one to design. Like, he was...
A challenge as well.
That's where a lot of the fun comes in the development of these, because I've said many times now, when we are doing the development on these, there are occasionally times where we've picked what may be like a, I don't want to say questionable, but a weird boss choice. So like Vort, as an example, might have been a weird boss choice. Like, he's kind of, I don't want to say throwaway, because I'm sure there are players that struggle with him, but he's generally a pretty easy boss.
Yep.
But he has some really cool mechanics behind him that represented on like a board game board. Super cool. This was another one that we thought, the fight is... We've made a game where movement is super important, and then we've put a boss in there who is almost entirely static. Like, he moves in like 2 or 3 spots along the edge of a tiny bit of... And it's basically just rush him down and don't get hit by a stupid fire.
So just some people have joined us asking, this the Old Iron King expansion is Kickstarter exclusive. Best thing to do is, if you missed the Kickstarter or you didn't put them in your backer kit and your pledge, is to check with your local gaming stores, because they have had the opportunity to order him via the Kickstarter as well, and they'll be getting their copies in Wave 2. So there will be the opportunity to buy him. You just need to sort of do a bit of Google foo and find them in the stores.
So I guess we'll do what we always do, start with the rulebook. So there is page 12 and 13, so this is where the rules talking through, you know, the individual boss mechanics, and then campaign at the back. So we won't spend too much time on that again, because you know what they look like. Then we shall move on to, I guess if you want to do the model, and I'll start going through this stuff.
So show off there. Stretch it out for you. We're using this fire beam out of the lava. The pose has been chosen for that one.
And in terms of what he looks like in the box, if we can see that fairly clearly on there, it's just the wings are separate and plug into a hole on his back. That one's super easy to put together.
Again, no glue required.
Nope. Just chuck him in and he'll sit. Just the health dial for him, no extra tokens and stuff. He has 44 health. I believe he has 3/3 defensive stats. Onto the board. This one's super cool, and I really like this one.
It's so bright.
It's very bright. So this is a slight adaptation of the area that you fight him in the game. The area that you fight him in the game would kind of, if we were to do it exactly, would stretch out a little bit wider here and be kind of more straight across there, and he would kind of operate. And a version of this boss did have that exact layout, and he had 3 nodes that he jumped across here, but it just meant the whole back end of the tile was dead space, and it just kind of didn't feel right. So then we toyed around with what happens if we get him moving in more of a triangle to bring these nodes back into play. So when you first enter the room, he will spawn on this node here, and you'll see that he has 3 Megaboss nodes. He moves around via his behaviours, which we'll go through in a second, and then obviously these are nodes that you can move on. You are not allowed to stand on his node, if I recall correctly, because you'll be standing in lava. And then obviously you're missing 2 nodes here and 2 nodes here, so the area itself is a bit smaller. I'll go over his mechanics in a minute, but he's a super fun one. And then we have a bit of Iron Keep going on here. Spin that round so it's the right way around for you guys to see, and try and line it up as best I can. So you run down here, and then you've got everything going on with the lava that then leads nicely into his room as you go through the fog gate that will be placed there. So that one's
cool layout for the enemies to ambush you as soon as you walk into the room, and the train all clustered.
Yeah, it's a pretty good one. Like, it's weird how different things feel when you play around with the node placement, because depending on what terrains these are, that can just block off. Like having a center node blocked off is a big deal.
Yeah.
There's also some fun stuff where, say we wanted to have 2 ranged guys, not on this tile obviously, but on a different tile with a different node layout. If we wanted 2 ranged guys here, and then did terrain piece, or terrain piece to kind of shepherd you that you have to come in this way, and then had another boss spawn node of melee guys here. So it's like you've got to come into the danger zone to. There's just some super fun stuff that we can do with just tweaking the layout of those nodes. So that's that one. Dun, 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 dun. What's next? Cards.
His behaviour cards.
Cards,
Put him
cards,
back
cards.
out. Put his.
Don't need those ones. Right, onto the cards. So as Jamie mentioned earlier, he also has signature cards that are always in his deck. They're called Firebeam cards. Anyone that's played Dark Souls will be familiar with what that means. And then I need these cards.
Question in from chat. After Wave 2 is over, will there be any other means of getting it? If we have overstock, I believe we'll probably take them to shows with us. That's pretty safe to say. So it could, if there is overstock, become a show exclusive. But the best thing to do is, if you've not ordered it via us, is to search local gaming stores, see if they've got him. They'll be the best place to get him.
Yep, the first point of call. So, let's go through this. So his initial starting deck contains all 3 Firebeam cards. They are all the same. They will basically all show that he will move to the node shown. These will be similar to anyone that watched the Calamite unboxing we did,
fire breath.
with the strafing cards with the fire breath stuff. So they show the...
There you are.
There we go. So they show the nodes that are hit, and then you've got the little D-pad icon to show the node that he moves on to before he does it, and then any of these nodes are hit. That deals 5 magic damage per. When he heats up, you add in one of his heat up cards, and any time these cards are drawn, the dodge difficulty increases by 1 and the damage increases by 1.
Oh.
So yeah, his heat up's pretty terrifying. Then we have a load of his cards here. So these are his regular behaviour cards. So we've got his Fist Pounds, a Swipe, a Shockwave, a Bash, and a Searing Blast. Searing Blast is it's kind of a more targeted version of these. It specifically goes for the aggro, 6 magic damage, and has infinite range. So that one's pretty scary.
So even though we can't move around the board, and you can just stand out of range of his attacks, eventually he will get you with the fire beams.
And the nodes on these obviously vary across. We have somewhere like a heat map, which is not intentionally a pun, which shows like the statistically safest place to stand, but also the safest place to stand will mean you're probably not doing a huge amount. So you've got to kind of weigh up where you want to be going. And then he has some pretty terrifying heat up cards. Firestorm's pretty scary. Infinite range out of the front arc, 5 damage, dodge value of 2. Magma Blast, which is a ramped up version of the one we just went through, where it's same damage but dodge 3, so
and
this
AoE.
and hits the node. So that one's pretty terrifying if you're playing a dodge build. Firestorm, which is the one I just went through, and then a double swipe, which will catch you out if you're getting in too close.
Questions? Expansion?
In about 3 weeks, hopefully.
Because in 3 weeks' time, we'll be doing that one. But yeah, I'm excited to get Wave 2 into the hands of into the backers and into stores as well. Give everyone a chance to fight some big nasties.
So anyone that's been here to see all of the unboxings we've done, what ones are people most looking forward to playing? I'm intrigued. What ones are you guys most looking forward to? So far we've done 4 Kings, Calamite. I guess we'll put Darkroot in there. It's not a mega boss, but we'll include Darkroot. Old Iron King, Gaping Dragon. Have we done any others? Or is
Guardian Dragon.
Yes, we did do Guardian Dragon.
These are the last 2. Everything in Wave 2 has now been.
Oh, we've got through all of it.
Done all of them. What was the boss you showed off before this one? They've just tuned in.
Gaping Dragon.
It was the Gaping Dragon, who is
this little boy,
absolutely massive.
Like The Old Iron King is not small by any stretch of the imagination.
And he's half submerged in his defence.
But, like, just look at it's mad.
It's ridiculously big. People saying 4 Kings. That was a...
We played that on stream, right?
Played that on stream, yeah.
Me and Gaz failed miserably because Gaz is bad at making good choices.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's available to view on the YouTube channel. Yeah. Poor Gaz.
No, not poor Gaz. He
Poor
brought it
Gaz.
upon himself. He's all for show, is old Gaz. He'll do anything for a laugh, including
Literally.
get us murdered.
But you can see from the little figures here just how big these boys are.
Yeah, they're enormous.
Do you have a favourite expansion, Alex? Chat have asked.
I really like Calamite, but it's sentimental from. I believe he was the first one that we put a huge amount of work on, and he was the first one where we had like this really cool concept from the get-go.
Yeah.
And that not having to change at all throughout the entirety of it, and just having this clear idea of the ways we wanted to make that fight represent what he does, and it kind of all clicking into place the way it did was a really, as a developer, a very satisfying thing when you can go through from sitting down, just throwing all the thoughts of the way you want this to go. Very often DC and I will sit down and look at the bosses and work out their main things.
Yeah.
And when you're making any game, we need to look at a concept DC calls complexity points.
Yep.
And you only have so many to spend, and you need to choose where you want to spend them. And within the video game, so many of the bosses have tiny little things that are like a feature of the fight.
Yeah.
But
Doesn't translate over.
how much do we need to do to tweak core rules to pull that in, and how much complexity does it add versus
very
omitting
easy to-
it and putting more focus on the big one?
Yeah. It's very easy to add as many rules as you want to make something as true to it as possible.
Yeah.
But then how often does that just turn into just drivel that
Yeah.
you forget because it's such a minor point?
And then it's kind of making sure that they all add to gameplay. One of my favourite moments within development with the game was Ornstein and Smell for the core game, where we were trying to decide whether they recovered a certain amount of health or whether whichever one you didn't kill just went to full.
Yeah.
The reason we went the way we did is it gives you 2 ways to go at the fight. And that was where we wanted to spend some complexity points, because it could have just been never put damage on the one you're not trying to kill, because there's no point.
Yeah.
But it makes it so that there's 2 ways to do that fight. You kill Ornstein or you kill Smaug, and then you kill the other one. And that's your 2 choices. Which one do you want to try and get down? And you can be in a position where you're just kind of not set up to do any damage on the one you want.
Yeah.
And you're just inclined to go, well, I'll just sit here and do nothing because it's not worth attacking the one directly in front of me.
I need to kill that one.
and
Focus fire.
And we wanted there to be 2 ways to attack that fight. We wanted you to have that option. Well, there's one standing directly in front of me. Should we try and keep them both on before they get the terrifying heat-up cards, get them both to 1 or 2 health, and then when they gain it, we feel like we've done something, and we have less time in the terrifying heat-up. So like the complexity points can be spent in so many different ways depending on which way you're looking at it. It's adding more cards doesn't necessarily add complexity.
Yeah.
Like when you look at Vought.
So some people have been asking for Vought, and then we've got questions about the retail Mega Boss expansions. If you feel up for spoiling some of them,
Go through some of that stuff. So Vought is one of he might be my favourite. Within the game, there are certain restrictions that can come in from kind of the graphic side of things and the presentation of the information to make sure it's clear. That's kind of something you take on when you decide to do iconography and symbol language. To try and make it clear. And one of those we know. So if we take one of these cards to break it down a bit, not a Firebeam one because that's a terrible example. Is there one with 3 in here? His are all pretty simple. Picked a terrible one to do. We will go for a Firebeam card just because it kind of lets me make the point I want to make.
Clear these guys out of the way. Move it, team.
So if you look at this card here, we've got these 3 coming across here. These are what in the background we called symbols. The smaller ones here are what we call icons.
Yep.
And we know per card we are limited to 3 symbols, and each symbol is limited to 4 icons.
Yep.
When we were looking at Vort, we knew we wanted him to be super, super mobile. The initial concept for him was that he was going to have special rules that meant whenever he wouldn't have much movement that meant he turned to face target, but all of his movement would be in a single direction.
Yeah.
And if he hit a wall, he'd make some sort of turn and then keep going the way he was going. And again, unintentional pun. We kept running into walls with it.
Yeah.
That was pretty awful, but not intentional. Where it was the easiest way of putting that rule in the game would have been when he hits a wall, turn to face target and keep going.
Yeah.
But it just meant he was targeting too much, and the initial concept of the boss was he doesn't target too much, but we knew he wanted to be super mobile. The only way we could make him as mobile as we wanted was to use all 3 symbols on a card for movement, but then he can't attack. An easy option there would be to make it so that all of his damage is on pushes.
But then it's
He's got so many other attacks he does with his mace and his frost breath and stuff, we wanted them in there. So the natural progression of that was, well, we know we're going to have some cards which are entirely taken up by movement.
Yeah.
Let's do another deck of cards that's entirely taken up by attacks.
Yeah.
And because that's a nice easy separation of, you have more symbols, but they're kind of the same symbol.
Yeah.
Every symbol on this card is going to be movement, every symbol on this card is going to be to do with an attack. It doesn't actually make it any more complex, it just gives us more of a toolkit to play around with. And then we offset the numbers on the decks to make the memorization harder, where there's 4 in the movement deck, 3 in the attack deck.
And then it's...
So and he heats up twice, and each heat up adds 1 card to one of the 2 decks, and he has 2 separate heat up cards, and then also does his frost breath when he heats up. Like, there's a lot going on. It's a very fun and frantic fight, which hits what the initial concept we wanted for him. It's so often you'll go through, have your concept, and the way you wanted to hit the concept just doesn't work.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean you've lost your concept entirely. You just need to go back to the drawing board, work out what restrictions you have, and work out how you can work within them.
Right.
But yeah, Vort is awesome. Big fan.
Questions from people on YouTube are people want to know about the character expansions and how they will influence the game, and people are crying out for any little scrap of information about the retail boss expansions.
Okay, so is there anyone in particular they want to know about? Any of the retail ones in particular? You can start with Last Giant.
Yeah, I think start with Last Giants.
So Last Giant, he was one where we knew the concept super early was we wanted to represent in his heat up him pulling his arm off and using it as a club. Like that's a nice easy one to translate across, which is represented by the increase of range on the attack. So before he heats up, his attacks are range 1.
Yeah.
After he heats up, they're in that box there are cards called arm cards.
Right.
They are signature cards that start off in the deck. When he heats up, they all get swapped out for other cards.
Okay.
Because they get longer range, because he pulls his own arm off and uses it as a club. He also has a falling slam card. Anyone that's played the game will know what that is. It's a fairly rare attack where he just falls over. That's in there. I believe, have we discussed wind up before? So the Asylum Demon has wind up.
Yes, we have done, where you get a chance to dodge.
You get a chance to spend a stamina to move.
Yeah.
So he also has some wind-up stuff in there as well. So some really hard-hitting attacks, which becomes way more prevalent as it's kind of going on and his range increases, and you're like, well, I can't get out of the way of it. So do I? Don't I? Do I just take the hit?
Just try and dodge, or just accept the roll and keep the stamina as the extra pip of health? Manus has had a surge of interest.
Okay. So Manus, one thing that part that we hadn't used yet, and we were saving it for Manus, we have an icon in the game called the shaft icon, which is, it doesn't hit range 1. We haven't used it on enemies yet. Yet. So Manus was the point that we wanted to explore how that works. The main trigger of that conversation was he has some dark magic attacks where a load of orbs fly out from him, and it's kind of like a weird AoE that kind of loops out and back over, and they kind of come towards him, but they don't get to him. They kind of loop up before they get back to him.
So if you run in and hug him,
which means if you're close to him, within theory, you're safe.
As safe as you can be, stood next to a Dark Souls boss.
He's also got like gigantic mutated arm thing and a massive catalyst that he hits you with. So a lot of his, when you're fighting that boss in the game, he is, at least in my experience, always been one. If I hug you as best I can, you're going to hit me, but the attacks you hit me with aren't as scary as the ones that would hit me if I'm standing over there somewhere.
Yeah.
It's kind of, when you break down a Dark Souls fight, when you're playing them, you've kind of, I personally would never go further back than mid-range. Some people, if you play sorcery or a super magic heavy pyromancy build, you're more likely to go further back. But I very much like the hug you, like closer than mid-range. Take advantage of poise, which is a stat that was in Dark Souls 1 that means you don't get basically knocked out of attack animations. So you get super high poise, just stand next to him and he'll clip you every now and then, and you're just standing there with a, I don't know, Zweihander or something. Shout out to Giant Dad.
Executioner's Chariots?
Executioner's Chariot. So he kind of breaks down into like a bit of a level 4 encounter mixed with kind of it's somewhere, when you fight the horse, it's somewhere between a mega boss and a main boss.
Right.
It's not full mega boss because it seems really unfair to say do something that is equivalent to a level 4 encounter and then go and fight this boss without resting.
Yeah.
So the chariot operates, you've got his board, the center node of the board is blocked off.
Okay.
You've got the little kind of alcovey things that you can jump into. There are necromancers, the black hollow mages or something is their in-game name, but necromancers for the sake of ease.
Okay.
They spawn opposite where you enter.
Yeah.
There will be 2 skeletons, which I believe spawn in the alcoves directly next to you. So there's only 2 spots you can stand in where you spawn.
Right.
And then there's 2 skeletons that spawn in on alcoves. When the necromancers activate, they do a ranged magic spell at the aggro, and then basically bring in a skeleton.
Okay.
So their first activation will be bringing a skeleton up with them, do some damage to you, and then the skeletons will go and they will start to pincer you in. The skeletons cause bleed.
Great.
And also push.
Great.
So they come towards you to push you out of the alcove, so when the chariot comes round, it smashes you.
Yeah.
The chariot starts on the node. God, I'm trying to picture this all in my head and think of a way of explaining it. If you picture the board being here, so this is your square, and you've got a node here, a node here, a node here, and a node here. He has kind of similar to the old Iron King style, where he will move from, at the end of the first activation of the players, he moves from there to there. Any nodes, any of the 5 nodes, so the node he came from, the 3 in the middle, if you're standing in an alcove you're safe, and then the one he ends on, if you're standing on one of those you take damage. And he basically moves around the board.
Continues around the board.
Continuing around, at the end of activation he moves to the next node. We were looking at putting the lever in, because in the game there's 2 ways you can kill him. You can shoot him with a bow, which takes forever, or you can run kind of around, kind of killing as you go to try and get rid of them, prioritising necromancers. You get to a lever, you pull a gate down, and then the chariot crashes into the gate, and then you have to fight the horse.
Right.
We were looking at doing that, but it just seemed needlessly complicated. That was one of those complexity points where it's like, we've got to spend so long explaining how this lever works.
It would feel a little bit cheesy to
You just
have this
skip past.
great big model that you just ignore. You go one-shot it and then be like, all right, did
Well, a lot of it was just trying to find the way where you prevented the first activation a player ever does. Is, well, I'm going to move. I'm going to, because of the way the nodes work, it's like 3 nodes away from where you start to go and stand on the lever. So we just like, your first activation, sprint, pull it, and then ignore half of the fight. So the version that we've gone with is that you just have to kill everything. So generally speaking, best strategy, go kill the necromancers first, stop skeletons from coming in, finish off the skeletons, fight the horse, is the general way to go about it. At least that's my best version from memory. There may have been things that changed in there between kind of development and everything getting locked on it. The Executioner's Chariot was one where there was kind of a really solid concept first, that we knew it wanted to be kind of this level 3.5 encounter. with something crazy going on in the background and then a boss fight. I can't remember all of the exact implementations without the rulebook in front of me, but it's along those lines.
And then just the final question, character expansion. So for those of you who've joined in late and have bought Dark Souls at retail stores, Wave 3 includes a absolute ton of expansions for the core game. You will be able to get those later on in time, but one of them is the character expansion, which allows you to play some more of the classes outside of the 4 in the core box, which breathes a whole new life into someone who's
Being
had that
able
game for a
to
while.
have a character that starts the game able to do magic damage at range is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, and clear through those early rooms, because they don't really have that magic resistance to start with, do they?
Well, the biggest part of like the video games of Dark Souls is kind of, if you like the series, that kind of enjoyment of you finish a playthrough
I've mastered
and
this
it's
class.
like what the
next?
build
What next?
diversity.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on where your focus is, because some would argue if you're into PvP, the build variety isn't well, it is massive, but there's kind of the meta builds. But the build variety is what makes the game super interesting and as replayable as it is, because you're looking at a game where the main focus is the boss fights.
Yeah.
If you played through the game 5 or 6 times, the boss fights, don't want to say become trivial, but they lose moment.
Yeah, you know their patterns, you know what to expect from this one, you know what his weaknesses are, you know how you beat him last time.
Like trying to cast my mind back to the first ever Dark Souls I played, but it told you nothing.
No.
It's like you walk through. It's like there's a big foggy door in front of me,
Yeah.
and it's telling me to press X to walk through it, and I have no idea what's on the other side of this door. And it was that kind of I mean, I'm not allowed to swear on here.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it definitely what it was. Something. And being able to bring that build diversity in from the start of the game is huge for those player character expansions, because it just opens the door to be able to focus on different builds from the get-go, rather than knowing that you do have limitations early on in the game. If you wanted to have someone who is kind of going more towards like a spellcaster of some description role, that's somewhat limited in the core box because of the equipment that you have available to you, because we know that the core game characters aren't necessarily particularly like spell focused. It's a lot of like faith kind of stuff from the herald, but you don't have a load of aggressive sorcery in there, because the sorcerer isn't in there. We wanted to put some of those cards in the treasure deck, so that if you wanted, like you really wanted to use Soul Arrow, it's in there.
You can do. Yeah.
And being able to open the floodgates, so to speak, on those spells and stuff, putting those in there so you can have your sorcerer character, your pyromancer character, you can have your dedicated healer. Because we've said from the start, the herald is more of the stamina healer. He's not necessarily...
Health.
He can be health, but you have to invest a lot to get you there, and ideally fight the dancer at some point, because she's got a really good healing spell in there. But yeah, opening the floodgates on that so that you can have this more kind of intelligence, damaged, focused build from the get-go changes a lot. And just being able to mix it up with the once per spark abilities, it just changes the experience you've got, and the variety that comes in the expansions, where there's the exploration expansions like Dark Route and the Explorer's expansion in the Iron Keep, where each of those sets of grunts has kind of, I wouldn't say a rule that they go by, but a slightly different focus, which means you may think when you put the sorcerer into a core game and you're just using core game stuff, he's just annihilating everything. This is so easy. And then you bring in some of the Iron Keep encounter cards, and you're
he's not doing it.
Okay, or the Dark Route, where there's a decent amount of armor but not a huge amount of resistance, but high health pools, is when you start to get into the deciding what you want to do is not necessarily as binary as the sorcerer is overpowered. Like in some situations he'll be very good, in some situations it's somewhat indifferent, but you can take advantage of the range. Like a decent amount of bosses have the same resistance as they do armor, so it doesn't make a huge difference what you go in when you're going in to do damage. But being able
turret at the back.
being able to just stand at range, don't worry about me guys, I'm good. But then they do a leap, and you're like, I'm not so good anymore. He has the same range as me.
Awesome, and I believe that that wraps us up quite nicely for the stream. Thank you guys for watching at home, and thank you for watching it on YouTube. Be sure to check out our other videos where we've unboxed the rest of Wave 2, and check out the Four Kings playthrough if you want to see a truly
miserable experience.
miserable for you. It was amazing for me watching. Thank you guys, and we shall see you again next time.